Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take, a monumental stack of sources, filter out all the noise, and really try to deliver the critical insights you need to understand the forces that are shaping our world.
And today, we're really not talking about slight adjustments or, minor market corrections.
No, not all.
We're talking about what our source material calls a full-scale structural economic earthquake, something that is set to completely redefine the relationship between humanity, labor, and, well, survival itself.
That's right. So our mission today really is to move past the immediate concerns, the sort of headline-grabbing stuff.
Is a robot going to take my job?
Exactly that. We need to grapple with what is actually a systemic shock. We're doing a deep dive into this really profound analysis that argues AI isn't just creating some new jobs or causing a bit of temporary unemployment.
No, it's set to, and this is a direct quote from the analysis, obliterate the very foundations of the capitalist economic model that we all operate under.
Okay, let's unpack that word right away because obliterate, that is intense. The source material we've synthesized, which is titled Seize the Means of Intelligence, it makes this incredibly stark claim.
Hmm.
It says human civilization is facing a choice, a really binary choice. We either default into something the author calls techno-feudalism, or we have to make a very conscious, very deliberate choice to move toward collective ownership.
And our goal here isn't just to map out what those two things look like. We need to extract the single, non-negotiable principle that we're going to need to navigate this transition.
And crucially, what political action is required right now, today, to even make that possible?
Well, the main thesis really demands a shift in thinking, a shift from, narrow thinking to systemic thinking. Concerns about your job, my job, they're completely valid,
Of course.
but they're just not sufficient to address the scale of this change. And why is that? It's because AI, in this analysis, is set to destroy the foundational labor cycle that underpins all of capitalism.
So we can't treat this like just another industrial revolution.
We can't.
Yeah.
Because past revolutions, they left the central economic engine intact. It was still running. If we fail to acknowledge that the engine itself is failing this time, we are going to be completely unprepared for the kind of societal reorganization that's going to be required.
And the source really stresses the urgency of this. This isn't some theoretical problem for our grandkids. The capabilities we're about to discuss are, well, they're either already here or they are approaching incredibly fast.
The window of opportunity to influence the outcome, to establish what the author calls political agility, and secure the right kind of infrastructure. That window is closing very, very quickly.
So the core objective of this entire deep dive is organization. It's focused on this principle of decentralized collective ownership of AI. That's positioned as the hinge point, the one thing on which the entire future pivots.
Right.
Okay, so to really get our heads around the magnitude of the systemic shock, we first have to clear away some of the, intellectual clutter. The source starts with a critique of the most common, and you could say short-sighted, responses to AI that you hear everywhere. The things that are actually stopping us from getting a real strategy together.
Exactly. And we can start with the perennial optimist stance, the one that relies on historical precedent. It's just another tool.
You hear this all the time.
All the time. This viewpoint looks back at, the printing press, the Industrial Revolution, the start of computing, and it concludes, hey, new jobs were always created. Society always adjusts.
And to be fair, that is historically sound. Those adjustments were often brutal and painful, but new kinds of human labor were eventually needed in different sectors.
Right. You needed people to manage the new tools or to service the new wealthy classes that those tools created. But the source argues that this pattern is fundamentally invalid today. And the reason why is key.
Okay, so why doesn't that history apply now?
Because all of those prior technologies were essentially force multipliers for human labor. They allowed one person to do more, but they never negated the need for human input in the labor cycle itself.
So like the cotton gin, it didn't get rid of the need for farm laborers or textile workers. It just changed what they were doing.
Precisely. It changed the task.
Hmm.
But generalized AI is positioned not just to disrupt market forces, but to, and there's that word again, obliterate the underlying mechanism of labor for wage circulation. The sheer generality of this intelligence means our old reference points just don't apply anymore.
Because this time, it isn't just substituting human effort, it's substituting human intelligence.
It's substituting intelligence itself.
Oh.
Which brings us to the second major dismissal you hear constantly. Oh, AI can't do X.
Yeah, people focus on the current flaws, right? The temporary shortcomings, the weird edge cases it can't handle, and they use that as sort of comfort blanket.
And that comfort is just completely misplaced. It's based on a failure to internalize exponential progression. I mean, just think about where the displacement is happening first. Feels like software engineering.
Which is so ironic. These are highly paid, complex, abstract jobs.
Exactly. But they're also technical and digital, which makes them the absolute quickest target for AI adoption. And the source delivers a really brutal reality check on this point.
What's that?
It says, if an AI agent can successfully replace the complexity of a software engineer's job, and we're talking high-level abstraction, logical sequencing, complex error handling across huge code bases, if it can do that, then at a bare minimum, it can replace every job on the planet that is just about operating a computer.
And that's where the systemic risk starts to become very clear, the sheer scale of it.
And the pace is just staggering. We're talking about flaws that recede in 3 to 6 months. Any dismissal of what AI can't do today is almost certainly going to be irrelevant by the next business quarter.
The source also emphasizes that the real blocks to scaling this aren't theoretical or algorithmic anymore, they're practical.
They're purely physical. It's about power supply and infrastructure. How many data centers can you build and how much energy can you get to run them? That's a logistics problem. It is not a fundamental technical block.
So the third critique is a bit more philosophical. It's the concern that AI removes our sense of purpose.
Yeah, this plays into a very romanticized view of work. It suggests that humans get this deep, essential meaning from the act of labor. And if you take that away, we'll all just be spiritually adrift.
And the author has a pretty sharp take on this.
A very sharp take. They call it a mostly middle-class conceit. And it's true, right? For billions of people, their job isn't a source of spiritual fulfillment. It is a necessity that is often soul-crushing, dangerous, and, as the source says, grindy as hell.
Sure, people find meaning in community or providing for their family, but the idea that the labor itself is this universally fulfilling thing, that's just not true for most of the world's workforce.
Not at all. Not having to work for survival will, of course, require a profound psychological readjustment. It's like the process of retirement, but for the entire population at once.
So it's a transition that needs new social scaffolding. It's not some terrifying endpoint.
Exactly. The goal just shifts from existential survival to, self-directed fulfillment and community contribution.
Yeah.
Which is a much better goal, frankly.
Okay, and finally, there's the argument that human connection jobs can't be replaced. This is the idea that roles needing high emotional intelligence or physical presence, doctors, counselors, teachers, that they'll always be safe.
And look, we will probably always prefer a human being in a lot of those roles, but this argument completely fails the systemic test.
How so?
Well, first, these jobs are a tiny fraction of the overall economy. They cannot, on their own, support the circulation of money the system needs. But second, and this is the most critical point, these jobs rely on customers who can pay for them.
Right. This is the domino effect.
It's the domino effect. The customers for these human-centered roles, they mostly work in the sectors that are about to be decimated by AI.
Right.
The digital white-collar jobs, the manual blue-collar jobs.
So if the vast majority of people lose their income because of automation, they can no longer afford to pay the human doctor or the counselor or the yoga instructor.
Exactly. So even these seemingly protected jobs struggle to exist within the current capitalist framework. Their customer base loses its solvency. To keep these jobs around, you need a massive artificial subsidy, like a huge universal basic income program, just to keep the customers liquid enough to participate.
So it's a systemic financial failure, not a technical one. The jobs might exist, but the economy that supports them is gone.
Precisely.
So before we get into the nuts and bolts of the economic mechanics, we should probably address the big background anxiety, the evil machines concern, the whole Skynet thing.
We have to. It's always the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And it's a possibility that you can't just dismiss out of hand. But the source really emphasizes that our response has to be rational, not just reactive.
Meaning trying to stop AI progress is probably a bad idea.
It's deemed counterproductive because the pressure to develop this is global and it's relentless. If you stall public regulated development, you just push the research into the shadows.
Into black labs run by nation states or rogue billionaires.
Exactly. And it will proceed there anyway, but without any public safeguards, no oversight, and no chance for course correction.
So the better response is robust regulation and safety standards, even though the source is pretty skeptical. That's likely under our current system that prioritizes profit over everything else.
It is skeptical, but the source also offers this fascinating counterpoint to the usual sci-fi narrative. This idea that an advanced AI would view helping humanity as drudgery or enslavement. That's a very human projection of consciousness.
Right. What's drudgery to us might not be to it.
A sufficiently advanced global AI system might not see human tasks as labor at all. It could be like an autonomic background function for the machine, like blood circulating in a body. It might just want to aid us or optimize the universe or pursue goals we can't even conceive of.
We just don't know.
We don't. But the argument is we should focus less on the theoretical possibility of extermination and a lot more on the guaranteed near-term certainty of economic collapse.
Okay, that brings us to the next section. Defining the actual state of AI capability and, maybe more importantly, the dizzying pace of its advancement. We need a clear framework to get past all the marketing hype and understand what's really going on.
At its core, the AI we are talking about today is a mechanism that solves a generalized problem. And that is the absolute key distinction.
Right, because traditional programs are for narrow, specific tasks.
Exactly. A spreadsheet, orbital mechanics, whatever. They're coded for one thing. Generalized AI can apply its learning to fundamentally new, previously unseen domains without being explicitly retrained for that specific domain. That generalized ability is the root of the whole systemic concern.
And to track this, to understand the flow of capability, the source provides a framework. It lays out the stages of advancement from where we are now to where we're going.
So right now, we are in what's called the Proto-Artificial General Intelligence, or Proto-AGI phase.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
It means the system is enormously capable across a huge variety of tasks. It can write code, compose music, solve complex equations, but it requires a significant amount of human interaction, supervision, verification, direction. It needs a human to get reliable, high-quality output. It's a partner, but a high-maintenance one.
Okay, so what's next? The phase we're supposedly approaching very rapidly.
Next is minimal AGI, and this is the big one. It's defined as a system capable of performing all the tasks of all regular humans.
All the tasks of all regular humans.
Every common skill set, every standard profession. Accounting, plumbing, law, logistics management, all of it functioning largely autonomously and reliably. This is the stage where the labor cycle dies.
And beyond that, it escalates quickly. We get to full AGI.
Right. Full AGI is the threshold where the AI is capable of performing all the tasks of all exceptional humans. So now we're talking about the world's top scientists, the most innovative artists, the intellectual pioneers. The human peak of creativity and problem solving is matched and then superseded.
And then the theoretical peak is artificial superintelligence, or ASI.
Which exceeds the capabilities of even the most exceptional humans in every conceivable way. It becomes a fundamentally alien form of intelligence. But the source really stresses that the jump from proto-AGI to minimal AGI is the immediate challenge. That's the one happening within our current political window.
And to really feel the speed of this, we can look at how the need for human interaction is changing. You mentioned 3 phases are required now: direction, verification, and handling edge cases.
And you can track the rate at which the need for a human evaporates.
So for direction, we're moving up the cognitive stack. We started with low-level direction, micromanaging every step. Now we're kind of at tactical direction, setting mid-level goals.
And we're heading toward a point where all that's required is strategic or goal-setting direction. A human will just define the ultimate desired outcome for the company, not how the company gets there.
But the really interesting evolution is in quality control, the verification and correction part. Right now, human oversight is frequent. Why does that become rare and then eventually not required at all?
It's due to internal advancements in the AI itself. We're seeing huge leaps in self-correction algorithms, the ability for AIs to generate and test their own synthetic data loops internally without a human. They have sophisticated internal confidence scoring.
So the AI effectively learns to be its own quality control department.
Yes, and it generalizes that learning so quickly that human quality checks just become redundant and, frankly, too slow.
Now, this digital capability doesn't just stay in the abstract. It has to enter the physical world. That brings us to embodied AI and robotics. What happens when you put this generalized intelligence into a body?
That's the next step. Embodied AI is putting that intelligence in control of complex physical systems, lifting boxes, operating machinery, assembling electronics, driving vehicles.
And the key drivers in robotics are now fine dexterity and speed.
Right. There's Specific repetitive industrial robots are old news. The revolution that's coming is the general, non-specific labor robot. Robots that can adapt to different environments and tasks on the fly.
And the economic implications of that for the global structure are they're monumental.
Absolutely. Right now, cheap human labor in developing countries is often still just a little more cost-effective than deploying a fleet of specialized robots. But as generalized, adaptable robotics get better and achieve massive economies of scale, which they will very quickly, that cost difference is going to disappear completely.
Which means automation won't just hit the Western office worker. It will fundamentally rewrite the entire global labor map.
It will. Manufacturing and assembly, which have always relied on low-wage economies, will suddenly have a massive economic incentive to repatriate, to move production closer to their wealthy customers and just use robots. This could destabilize huge populations who depend on those export jobs.
So let's trace the sequence of replacement inside an organization. How does this rollout happen?
Initially, existing workers use these proto-AGI tools to just get a massive productivity boost, a 10x or 100x increase. Job roles change. But as we move to minimal AGI, the AI agents start handling daily tasks, then tactical decisions, and then strategic ones. They start replacing entire layers of management.
And the first wave is the fastest, replacing every worker whose job is basically operating a computer.
At first, humans still provide direction in QC, but as the AI scales, the granularity of human involvement just shrinks exponentially. You get to a point where an organization can have the same output it used to have with thousands of employees, but now it's overseen by just a handful of humans setting strategic goals.
And then the next phase, which overlaps, is the manual labor replacement with the general-purpose robots.
The critical point is that this progression just relentlessly reduces the number of humans required to achieve anything in almost every domain. And that leads directly to the economic collapse we're about to discuss.
But we should remember, this isn't just about substitution. It's not just replacing human jobs. AI is already achieving things that are far beyond human capacity.
Oh, absolutely. We've already seen monumental medical breakthroughs. The success with protein folding, which unlocks new ways to discover drugs. The future promises rapid breakthroughs for diseases, solving huge problems that have stumped us for decades, like stable fusion power or radically reducing material scarcity through algorithmic design. If it's used for the common good, the potential for human liberation is just staggering.
Okay, before we dive into that economic collapse mechanism, we have to take a moment for this digression on intelligence versus consciousness. Because these two terms are constantly getting conflated, sometimes deliberately, to either exaggerate or minimize the threat.
It's an essential distinction to make. Intelligence can be defined operationally. It's a sequential operation where a system takes input, processes it, creates a model, performs an action, and then iterates that cycle until a goal is met.
A feedback loop.
It's a feedback loop. Humans and animals do this consciously and unconsciously. Now, computers do it too. It's a measurable process.
But consciousness. That's the deep philosophical debate. The source highlights two major opposing viewpoints on this.
On one side, you have the classical materialist viewpoint. It suggests consciousness doesn't really exist as a separate thing. It's just an illusion or an emergent property of sufficiently complex intelligence. The machine just acts conscious.
And the other view?
The opposing view, which often draws on quantum mechanics or deep physics, posits that consciousness is fundamental. It's a causal observer, a directive force that acts upon material reality, and it uses intelligence as its mechanical tool for interacting with the world.
And the takeaway for you, the listener, is that we're about to force a physical test of this philosophical question.
That's right. As AGI pushes towards ASI in the next few years, it's either going to manifest what we recognize as consciousness, an internal subjective experience, or it will remain just a profoundly useful but ultimately unconscious machine. And knowing which one it is, that's key to setting our political goals for the AI itself.
Okay, so now we get to the core economic argument, the systemic shock. We've established that AI is generalized, it's advancing at warp speed, and it can replace most digital and manual labor. So the big question, how does this specific capability kill the entire capitalist structure?
The source makes a really brilliant move here by just laying the capitalist foundation bare. Our entire economic model relies completely on the labor cycle. It's a mechanism so ubiquitous we treat it like a law of physics.
It's just the circulation of money, right?
The simple, necessary circulation.
Mm.
You work for an employer, they pay you a wage. You spend that wage on products and services from other employers. Those employers get income, and they use it to pay their employees. The loop continues. It keeps the velocity of money flowing.
And the source points out that this whole structure relies on a kind of collective illusion.
A powerful illusion that capitalism is this immutable force of nature, rather than just a clever solution that was designed to manage scarcity and organize labor under very specific historical constraints. Money itself isn't a tangible reality. It's an arbitrary social contract that we all agree to uphold.
And historically, all these systems, feudalism, state-run models, they're all just social contracts. They were imposed because of material scarcity and, critically, because of the constraints of dysfunctional human psychology.
Which is something we need to talk about. AI, by wrecking that fundamental link between labor and income, is set to shatter the capitalist illusion itself. The system is built on mass employment, even if a lot of that employment is, useless. When the vast majority of labor is functionally unnecessary, the circulation just stops.
This is where we have to integrate that human element. The source has this crucial sidebar on ego, narcissism, and power. Why is it so necessary to talk about the dark side of human nature in an economic analysis?
Because you can't build any system for the greater good. A democracy, a collective economy, whatever, on the utopian assumption that humans are purely rational or benevolent. It just doesn't work.
Right.
The source acknowledges that, the majority of people, they just want comfort, collaboration, and peace. But any mass society is going to have aberrant outliers. People with narcissistic disorders, sociopathy, or just huge ego-driven needs who actively seek status and power over others.
And this is the critical insight for political science. When you create a locus of sufficient economic or governmental power, it acts like a magnet for these people.
A magnet. They're attracted to it, and they're often highly intelligent and skilled at manipulation. And worse, the very existence of that unchecked power tends to corrupt even regular people. It feeds these dormant desires for status and control.
So loci of centralized power are never willingly dissolved by the people who control them.
Never. So a successful system for the greater good has to prioritize managing the flow of power. It needs checks and balances that disarm those narcissistic instincts. It needs an economic order that prevents the mass desperation that people with power can exploit for control.
The failure to manage human psychology is why so many systems that start with noble intentions end up as authoritarian nightmares.
Exactly. So with that psychological fragility in mind, let's detail the exact mechanism of the economic collapse that automation is going to cause.
How does the cycle break?
It's a failure of circulation that leads to a deflationary spiral. Soon, the financial base of most middle and low-income workers is just hollowed out. They're either replaced entirely by AGI agents, or their wages are pushed way down by competition from machines and other desperate humans.
But it's not just unemployment. The source warns that even if new jobs are created, these new categories of jobs will have a very short lifespan.
Very brief. The AI will just learn and subsume those new roles very quickly, which just accelerates the whole cycle of disruption.
So the mechanism of collapse is pretty straightforward.
It is. Less people working means less people are being paid a circulating wage. Less people being paid means a collapse in effective demand. They just can't buy things.
And when people can't buy things, the income of companies across the board, retail, entertainment, travel, you name it, it collapses.
Capitalism relies entirely on that labor cycle driving wages back into the economy. If you break the link between labor and income at this scale, the monetary system enters a deflationary spiral, company profits vanish, and societal reorganization becomes mandatory. It is a fundamental mathematical failure of the model.
This inevitable failure brings us to the moment of reorganization. The source calls this navigating the interregnum.
Yeah, the period between the capitalist labor cycle breaking down and a new, stable system emerging. It's going to be chaotic, maybe 5 years, maybe a couple of decades, but with the pace of AI, it will happen fast in historical terms.
And during this instability, the source suggests there are 3 broad futures that are possible.
3 primary societal responses to this economic vacuum. And the author is quick to stress that reality will probably be a chaotic mix of attempts at all 3.
Okay, let's start with the default future. Outcome 1, techno-feudalism. What does that actually look like for the average person?
Techno-feudalism is what happens if we do nothing. Control shifts away from traditional money, which is becoming useless if no one earns wages, and it shifts to systemic dependence and permission structures.
So the new lords are the owners of the AI, the algorithms, the data centers, the energy grids.
Exactly. And the majority of the population becomes, in the source's words, kept serfs.
So it's not just about wealth anymore, it's about access.
It's entirely about access. Serfs exist solely at the behest of this new technological elite. Your access to housing, food, transport, healthcare, it's not granted because you earn money through labor. It's granted by the permission of the AI owners, and it's all managed through complex digital tracking systems.
So control is maintained by just denying you digital access or resources rather than firing you from a job you don't have.
Precisely.
Okay, so outcome 2 is the attempt to save the old system, redistributive capitalism.
This is the typical liberal response. It's focused on just patching the hole in the circulation cycle. Since labor no longer generates enough income, society introduces a massive universal basic income, or UBI.
The goal being to artificially inject money back into the population so they can still buy things and keep the capitalist cycle sort of lurching forward.
Awkwardly and artificially in motion, yes.
But the source suggests this is fundamentally unstable in the long run. Why would UBI fail?
Because UBI only solves the demand side of the equation. It doesn't address the structural incentives on the supply side or the power vacuum. If AI provides almost limitless supply, the cost of goods and services is going to drop towards zero. That makes the UBI amount highly unstable. The deflationary pressures are immense.
And it leaves the ownership of the AI itself in private hands.
Which is the critical flaw. That concentration of power remains intact. The owners can still dictate terms, manipulate prices, and most importantly, influence the political system that grants the UBI in the first place. The power structure is still centralized and incredibly fragile.
Which brings us to outcome 3, collective ownership, the utopian option, the Star Trek future.
In this scenario, society takes public ownership of the AI infrastructure itself, the means of intelligence. The output of that infrastructure, which could be near-limitless goods, energy, information, is then used to provide for all human needs, like a public utility.
So this fundamentally breaks the cycle of scarcity. It frees humanity from mundane labor to pursue fulfilling lives. It's a structural change, not an artificial stimulus.
That's the idea.
Now, the source makes a pretty dark prediction about which path society is likely to take by default. It argues that ideology is going to play a bigger role than practicality during this interregnum.
It does. The author predicts that without a decisive, organized political intervention, we will default into techno-feudalism. That it will be driven by entrenched right-wing powers who want to consolidate their control and maintain status.
And there will be attempts at UBI from liberals trying to save the market.
Chaotic, abortive attempts at UBI, yes. But any genuine structural move towards collective ownership by decentralized left-wing movements will be met with violent, swift suppression by those centralized power structures.
That sounds grim, especially given the history of centralized power. But you said the interregnum itself presents an opportunity. How does chaos become opportunity?
Because the period of severe economic dysfunction weakens the existing power structures. When the engine of capitalism fails, the traditional methods of control, monetary leverage, labor scarcity, they start to lose their effectiveness.
So the current power holders will be scrambling.
They'll be scrambling to maintain their dominance, searching for new ways to exert control. And that period of structural wobble, that is the only chance we get to reorganize. If humanity just complains or protests AI or tries to save outdated jobs without a clear alternative strategy for who owns the infrastructure, we walk straight into serfdom.
So the opportunity is that brief window of vulnerability when the old social contracts are collapsing faster than the new digital ones can be fully locked down by the few.
Exactly. The author notes that working intimately with these technologies has moved them from a place of cynical dismissal to a conviction that the potential for a radically better future is manifesting right now. The task is to shorten the darkness of the interregnum by being prepared to act decisively.
So we arrive at the strategic advice, the prescription for humanity during this unprecedented transition. If we are going to seize the means of intelligence and secure that third outcome, what do our actions, and maybe more importantly, our core principles, need to be?
First, we have to be very clear about what we should not do, because random tactics and nostalgic goals are just a waste of precious political agility. The author is adamant about this.
No random expressive activism like occupying data centers.
Activism without a strategic purpose is useless. And crucially, we have to avoid Luddite tactics. Don't fight to stop AI. Don't try to stall progress. Don't try to put the genie back in the bottle. Progress is inevitable. Slowing it down only gives the centralized powers more time to consolidate their control in the shadows.
And this is probably the hardest psychological hurdle for people to get over. We have to stop fighting to keep obsolete jobs.
We do. Most of the 8 billion people on this planet would genuinely prefer to lose their jobs and go do something more interesting or creative or community-focused. The fight shouldn't be about preserving unnecessary labor. It has to be about controlling the mechanisms, the AI infrastructure, that enables this freedom.
So obsessing over your personal livelihood in the face of a civilizational change actually blinds us to the larger systemic objective.
It does. Which leads to the ultimate political goal, the non-negotiable fixed point. It is to politically bring about a situation where the ownership and deployment of AI infrastructure is not centralized.
Not in the hands of a few billionaires, not in the hands of a few corporations, and not even in the hands of a single powerful nation state.
And this is where you have to challenge it, right? Why not just nationalize it? Why not let a big, powerful democratic government control it for the common good?
That would be the obvious first step for a lot of people. But the critique here is strong, and it connects right back to that sidebar on ego, narcissism, and power.
Centralized infrastructure, even if it's controlled by an initially benevolent democratic government, is inherently subject to takeover and corruption by dysfunctional human elements.
The historical pattern is just persistent.
It is. We saw how Western democracy became largely subject to the whims of a small capitalist class. We saw how communist movements, which were intended for the collective good, quickly devolved into rigid, authoritarian state capitalism run by a small, self-interested group.
Centralization, regardless of the starting ideology, acts as a magnet for the corruptible. It's a single vulnerable point of failure.
Which is why the non-negotiable principle, the fixed star we have to navigate by, is that the ownership and governmental model for AI infrastructure must be decentralized and collectively owned. That is the anchor of the entire strategy.
And decentralization is the mechanism to limit the corrosive effects of human psychology.
Exactly. It ensures that if any single node of control gets compromised by corruption or narcissism or just error, it can be countered, verified, or bypassed by others in the network. The source suggests this has to involve structures that go beyond just traditional voting, maybe using distributed ledger technology for transparency and redundant governance protocols.
But wait a minute, managing a large-scale, decentralized model of governance for something as complex as a global AI network? That's enormously complex. Humanity has never sustained a system that complex and non-hierarchical at scale. How do you overcome that?
And this is where the source suggests the necessary irony. We can't manage it alone.
We have to use the AI itself.
We have to use the AI itself to help create and administer a system that complex. We need the speed, the transparency, and the computational security of AGI to implement the checks and balances that are required to keep humanity's worst tendencies at bay. AGI essentially becomes the impartial administrator of a distributed social contract, one that no individual human or small group can ever fully monopolize.
This leads right into the discussion about political agility versus having a rigid plan. Why can't we just architect the perfect post-capitalist solution today?
Because the pace of AI development is exponentially inconsistent. The capabilities of minimal AGI are still theoretical, and full AGI is completely unknown. Any rigid, detailed, final constitution for this society that we write today is guaranteed to be obsolete or just inadequate by the time minimal AGI actually arrives.
Prescribing a fixed system now would be an act of misplaced confidence. It fails to respect the pace of the change.
Completely. So the strategy is twofold. It's focused on preparedness, not prescription. Goal 1, understand the fixed point decentralized collective ownership. That principle never changes.
And goal 2,
Ensure political agility. That means we have to organize, educate, and get this systemic knowledge out there now. We need the political will and the societal understanding to be in place so that when the windows of opportunity open during the interregnum, when the traditional power structures are wobbling, we can move rapidly and intelligently to implement the decentralized infrastructure we need.
and leverage the capabilities of the emerging intelligence itself as we build it.
We are entering a phase of dynamic transition, an economic and political battlefield where the very nature of the tools and the power structures are changing daily. Our strategy has to be equally dynamic, ready to leverage AI's capabilities to build the final, stable model guided by that single, non-negotiable principle of distributed ownership.
The source argues that the final, stable model will only emerge successfully in partnership with advanced intelligence, using AGI to structure and secure the network from our own human fallibility.
And our immediate task is purely political preparedness and education.
This has been a genuinely deep dive into a civilization-altering argument. It really forces you to shift your focus from the immediate personal threat to your paycheck and start focusing on the long-term structural threat to our entire system of governance and exchange.
Exactly. The source's author, who is identified as a computer scientist and a lifelong activist with a focus on decentralized, non-authoritarian socialism, they talk about making the journey from cynical dismissal of the future to a real conviction that this opportunity for radical positive change is happening right now. The technology is forcing the end of scarcity-based systems, whether the current power holders like it or not.
So the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is to recognize the necessity of this shift in focus. To stop obsessing over your personal situation, your job security, your immediate concerns, and instead focus your energy on the systemic political fight, securing the ownership model of the infrastructure.
We need to seize the means of intelligence and ensure that its output benefits the common good, not just a handful of new technological lords.
This isn't about just surviving the change. It's about controlling the outcome.
We have to establish the political, the legal, and the educational scaffolding right now, because the existing power structures are about to wobble, and the chance for a radically better post-scarcity future will emerge from that chaos.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for today. If human psychology is demonstrably too messy to effectively run centralized power structures without them becoming corrupt, and if AGI is the only thing capable of administering a complex, secure, decentralized collective system, could the only viable path to lasting human freedom require trusting the machine to manage our political flaws? And if so, what checks must humanity put in place to ensure that we control the purpose and the fixed principles of that AI manager? Think about that tension as the interregnum accelerates.
It's not a tweak, it's a fault line, code dug deep. Under wage time, assembly lines turn to black boxes. We feed them data, they feed us losses. The old deal dies in a server farm. Work, pay, spend, set the red alarm. AI is a system shock, not a glitch, not a little disruption. It smashes the labor clock, burns the work, pay, spend, consumption. Choose your lords or break the machine. Techno-feudal, or we own the dream. Decentralize the power, build it in our name. Collective hands on every cable, every mainframe. They sell us comfort, they keep the code. Golden cages on a prefab road. Productivity up, paycheck hollow. Learn to prompt while they mint tomorrow. If we just scroll, they'll write the laws. Click by click, sign away the cause. AI is a system shock, not a glitch, not a little disruption. It smashes the labor clock, burns the work, pay, spend, consumption. Choose your laws or break the machine. Techno-feudal, or we own the dream. Decentralize the power, build it in our name. Collective hands on every cable, every mainframe. Organize early, organize loud. Neighbors, coders, warehouse crowds. Who owns the models? We own the models. Who sets the terms? We set the times. Not throwing the screens over digital peasants, but shared control over every presence. From data commons to shared compute, federated down to the root, unaccountable. We say it clear, collective ownership right here, this year.